CNBC-TV18, embarking on a quarter century of excellence.
Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening on CNBC-TV18. The Sensex and the Nifty recover in the last hour, ending with marginal gains. Bank stocks decline, mid-caps outperform. Investors around the world tread with caution ahead of the US Fed rate decision later tonight. The CNBC Fed survey shows market participants expect the status quo. A majority, 53%, expect the first rate cut by June next year. More than 190 nations agree for the first time to transition away from fossil fuels at the COP28 Climate Summit. The deal was clinched at the 11th hour after oil-producing nations agreed to replace the words phasing out with transitioning away from fossil fuels. The United Nations votes overwhelmingly in favor of an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. 153 countries, including India, call for a ceasefire. US President Joe Biden says Israel is starting to lose support over its indiscriminate bombing of Gaza, adds that Netanyahu must change, exposing a new rift in the relations with Israel's Prime Minister. A major security breach in the Lok Sabha on the anniversary of the 2001 Parliament attack. Two men jumped from the visitors' gallery onto the floor of the House and released yellow smoke from a canister. Two more individuals detained near the Parliament complex. The government tables a revised criminal code bills in Parliament, proposes a death penalty for mob lynching and hate crime. Also expands the definition of terrorist act to include threats to economic security and monetary stability. The government does not include gender-neutral provision criminalizing adultery as recommended by the parliamentary panel. Tax authorities seek more time to finalize treatment of cryptocurrencies and virtual digital assets. Sources say the tax department is still examining if crypto should be treated as a financial instrument or as a product or a service. Mohan Yadav takes oath as the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh after BJP's resounding victory. Prime Minister Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah, former Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan in attendance. Netflix releases its first ever viewership report, says close to 100 billion hours of content was viewed in the first 6 months of 2023. Season 1 of The Night Agent tops the charts. Rana Naidu is the most watched Indian OTT series. Well, as always, let's start with the market action for the day. Stocks staging a recovery in the late trade to end largely in the green. The Sensex and the Nifty ended with marginal gains. Mid-caps outperformed with the index gaining nearly 400 points. That's a Nifty for you. Flat but in positive territory, just about closing 20 points high. Reliance Industries 0.5% high. HDFC Bank with a red tick but flat. The Nifty mid-cap up by about 1.5%. IT stocks dragged the market today but finally closing just about in the green. Now, the US Federal Reserve is expected to announce its policy decision later tonight. As per a survey by CNBC, the Fed is expected to keep interest rates unchanged for the third meeting in a row. Over 50% of respondents to the survey see the Fed beginning rate cuts in June next year. Respondents increased the probability of a soft landing to 47% and lowered the possibility of a recession in the next year to 41%. The survey also suggests that an average respondent expects the unemployment rate to rise in 2024. And as always, catch our Fed coverage 11:30 p.m. onwards right here on CNBC-TV18 as we tell you what Jerome Powell will say. The big global story, nearly 200 nations have agreed to transition away from fossil fuels for the first time at the COP28 summit. Now, this 11th hour deal was struck after a tug-of-war between developed economies and oil-producing companies. Sonal Bhutra standing by now with more. Sonal, what does the language of the new deal indicate? Phasing out being replaced with transitioning away.
Well, yes, that's right. It's the first time that the term fossil fuels is used in a COP summit agreement. And after a lot of disagreements and agreements, finally, there is some update that has come by. Well, what has happened is they have spoken about transitioning away from fossil fuels versus the earlier expectation of phasing out of fossil fuels. Now, remember, the previous draft did not contain fossil fuels at all. So it did draw a lot of disagreement and disapproval from the likes of United States, European Union, and a lot of other nations as well. Now that this has come by, there is some some relief because, as I said earlier, this is the first time that the word fossil fuel has been used. Apart from that, not only transitioning away from fossil fuel has been a first-time thing in this particular agreement, they've also spoken about phasing out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies which do not address energy poverty. So this is the first as well in this agreement. The other provisions, they were largely understood and they were largely agreed upon as well. Something like tripling of renewable energy capacity, something that all the nations agree to. The other one would be doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvements. This is by 2030, accelerating towards phase down of coal usage. And that is something that is surprising as well because this is something that developing nations did not agree to so much, but there has been an approval here. Accelerating efforts globally towards net zero emission energy systems. And lastly, they also spoke about accepting net zero technology as well, and technology transfers were also spoken of. Now, I was just going through the draft and over last 12 days, whatever has happened at COP. So some of the things which really stood out here, they operationalized the loss and damage fund for the first time ever. There were pledges of around $700 million, but it fell short. It started with a bang, but then there were not many updates on loss and damage. Total estimates of fund needed as per estimates is around $400 billion. So it's way short of what the world really needs right now. There was no accountability for historic polluters, the bigger companies, the developed nations, the likes of US and China as well. There was exclusive focus on rapidly phasing down unabated coal versus fossil fuel. So yes, fossil fuels is used, but nobody thought that coal usage would be phased out as well. They spoke about funding the food sector to the tune of $7 billion. So that was a positive takeaway. But the biggest one, of course, the usage of fossil fuel in a COP agreement that has never been done.
Yes, finally, an 11th hour impasse being broken and an agreement being arrived at. Sonal, many thanks for joining us. The other big global story, more than 150 nations in the United Nations General Assembly have voted in favor of a resolution that calls for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. India was one of the nations voting in favor of the ceasefire. 10 countries, including the United States and Israel, voted against the resolution, while 23 nations abstained. India's permanent representative to the UN, Ruchira Kambod, said there is an enormous humanitarian crisis and a large-scale loss of human lives in Gaza. India had earlier abstained from voting on Gaza in the UN. In fact, during a vote in the end of October, 120 nations supported a ceasefire, and that has now gone up to 153 countries with this latest vote. Even as calls for a ceasefire grow louder, Israeli forces continued their shelling in southern Gaza's main city, Khan Yunis. As per health officials, 11 Palestinians have been killed in recent airstrikes. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden offered his strongest criticism yet of the Israeli government's handling of the war. At a fundraising event for his 2024 election campaign, Biden said Israel is starting to lose support over its indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. Biden mentioned Israel's far-right politician and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and said this is the most conservative government in Israel's history. He added that Netanyahu must change as this government in Israel is making it very difficult for him to move. However, in a subsequent news conference with Ukrainian President Zelensky, Biden moderated his statement. Take a look.
I think that we have made it clear to the Israelis, and are aware, that the safety of innocent Palestinians is still of great concern. And so the actions they're taking must be consistent with attempting to do everything possible to prevent innocent Palestinian civilians from being hurt, murdered, killed, lost, etc.
Well, that's President Joe Biden. He's also announced $200 million in extra aid to war-torn Ukraine. While addressing a press conference after meeting Ukrainian President Zelensky, President Biden added that the U.S. government will continue to support Ukraine in its war against Russia as long as it can. Business confidence among Japan's biggest manufacturers has hit a two-year high in the fourth quarter. As per a survey by the Bank of Japan, an index for the mood of large manufacturers rose to 12 from 9 in the previous quarter, improving for the third straight quarter. An index for small manufacturers turned positive for the first time since early 2019. Now, the data has been released ahead of the central bank's policy decision next week, so that's good news coming in there from Japan. Netflix has released its viewership data on nearly all of its shows and movies for the first time. The report also called What We Watched ranks almost all Netflix shows and movies by the number of hours viewed over the last 6 months. The company has said that close to 100 billion hours of content was viewed for the first 6 months of 2023. Netflix added it will release these reports every 6 months. On your list, the shows that have clocked the maximum viewership. The advertising revenue of Elon Musk's X, the social network formerly known as Twitter, is projected to fall to $2.5 billion in 2023, according to a report by Bloomberg. X expects quarterly advertising revenue of $600 million as it clocked in the previous quarters of the fiscal. However, this is lower than the $1 billion per quarter that the company saw in 2022. Back home, Axis Bank shares down in trade after 1% of the bank's equity changed hands at a little over 1,100 rupees a share. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that Bain Capital is the likely seller. There will be a lock-in period of 90 days as part of this deal. Here's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. Warburg Pincus is likely to pare its stake down in Fusion Microfinance via a block deal. Sources tell us that the private equity firm is looking to sell shares worth around 1,000 crore rupees. Investment banks are building a book to gauge demand for the stake sale. Currently, Warburg Pincus arm Honey Rose holds more than 39% stake in Fusion Microfinance. Shares of PI Industries under pressure after Rainbow Agro's announcement of its foray into the market that it is a leader in. Speaking to CNBC-TV18 on the reports of rising competition, the agrochemical producer's managing director Rajneesh Sarna said he doesn't see any major impact in the near or medium term. He added that the company has retained its growth guidance for FY24 at between 18 to 20%. After that clarification, the stock did recover, finally closing about 1.5% lower. Take a look.
Regarding whether these capacity announcement or some of these generic companies getting into this molecule has any serious threat for the innovator or the existing manufacturer? Absolutely not. The current market is, for example, 600-700 million, but the potential to grow is multi-billion dollar.
Rajneesh Sarna there of PI Industries. The big national story, a major security breach occurred in Parliament during the 0 hour today. As per officials, 2 people were detained after they jumped into the Lok Sabha chamber from the visitors' gallery with gas-emitting objects. 2 others were detained outside the Parliament for protesting with canisters that gave out yellow smoke. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla said that an investigation is underway. The incident comes on the 22nd anniversary of the 2001 Parliament attack. Network 18's Arunima has more.
So the sequence of event, as we have been told after preliminary inquiry by the Parliament Security and the Delhi Police, is this. There seem to be 4 people involved, 2 separate incidents. In the first incident, the 2 managed to gain access to the visitors' gallery in Lok Sabha. Pratap Simha, the Mysuru MP of the Bharatiya Janata Party, his credentials were used because the Parliament security system is that an MP will have to recommend. If you as a visitor want to come here, some MP will have to recommend. So his recommendations were utilized. Preliminary assessment seemed to be that this duo hid some kind of a spray bottle inside their shoe and they jumped off from the visitors gallery. They were sitting in gallery number 3. They jumped inside the Lok Sabha chamber. Rajendra Agarwal was in the speaker's chair at that point. Malda MP Mr. Kundu was taking the floor at that point, and the house was adjourned. These 2 opened up the spray and started spraying some kind of a yellow chemical. We don't know what that chemical was, but Mr. Beniwal, the MP from Rajasthan, tried to grab hold of him. He pushed him. So the duo were willing to fight it out, and they subsequently tried to get out of the situation when Parliament security grabbed them. While this was happening, outside on the Transport Bhavan side, which is the main entrance of the Parliament building, 2 people, Neelam and Amol, they also detonated some yellow-colored smoke canister. We are not sure what this was, but prima facie it looked like the kind that you often use in Holi to really have colored smoke around you. Slogans of Tanashahi nahi chalegi, Kala Kanun nahi chalega were heard both inside and outside. Joint interrogation of all 4 is on. 2 have been identified, but 2 who were inside, their identification has not been made public yet.
Well, security breach there in Parliament today. Now, in a significant move within the private growth equity ecosystem, Singularity Growth, an operator-investor-led growth equity platform, has appointed Mithun Sacheti as its co-sponsor and general partner. Mithun will play a crucial role in the investment committee and actively participate in the decision-making process for future investments. Mithun is an entrepreneur who founded Carrot Lane and sold his remaining stake to Titan for over 4,600 crore rupees. This move valued the brand at a whopping 17,000 crores, making it India's biggest deal in the D2C e-commerce space. To take up this discussion, we're now joined by Yash Kela, the founder and chief investment officer at Singularity Growth, and Mithun Sacheti, co-sponsor and general partner at Singularity. Yash, Mithun, many thanks for joining us here on the program. Mithun, I'll start by asking you, when we last spoke, which is when you closed the deal with Titan, and I asked you what you intended to do, you said you're going to take a break for a while. So I would imagine with this decision and this move, the break is now over officially.
Yeah, the break is over. I had a great time, traveled around. Actually, the break was more to figure out what I want to do. And certainly investing was something that I've always enjoyed, and I look forward to partnering with Yash and take this forward. My whole journey, I always felt that investing requires an operator as a part of this partnership as well. And I thought that this investor-operator relationship is something that will help us sort of work with Indian businesses differently.
The break is over. You've decided to join hands with Yash, and this starts your journey as an investor. Is this going to be the only investment-related foray that you intend to make, or are there others on the anvil, others that you are considering as well?
Well, on the operating side, no. I think this might be the only one that I look to do. Of course, on the as participant in other funds, etc., that's normal. One would do that part, but no, on the investing operating side, this is the platform that Yash and me want to sort of scale up, and we really want to. I mean, I feel there's some skill sets I gathered at Carrot Lane, and those will be useful to help the opportunities that we see around.
You know, speaking about scale and what you bring to the table, yes, I would imagine that the skills that you acquired as an entrepreneur will certainly be put to use here as well, Yash. But what else do you bring to the table? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of capital?
That's to me?
Yes, that's to you.
Yeah, so, as sponsors, I've seen that most people bring in about 3-4% of capital, and I was very conscious that that's not a number that one should go with. And we're clear that 15% of the capital must come from the sponsors, because that puts skin in the game for people who want to invest as well, and also puts us, we put our money where our mouth is, and we sort of work with that. So about 15% of the commitment should come from us as sponsors.
Okay, 15% of the commitment. Yash, congratulations on bringing Mithun on board. And let's talk a little bit about what this is going to bring to the mix as far as Singularity's growth trajectory is concerned, your investment plans from here on.
Shireen, first of all, thank you so much for having us. Mithun is a phenomena, and we have been blessed, and I think we've been working together with him, being a part of the investment committee for the last 2 years. And I think we believe that having this operator inside is fairly unique to how a business can grow. We have executed Fund 1 with the guidance of, everyone around us. And now Fund 2 will be, a larger scale up around Fund 1, which was core, which is participating in companies, which are at that cusp of growth. In capital efficient categories, these are companies which are typically between 200 to 800 crores of revenue, and at steady state can generate 30-40% ROCEs. Each pool of capital for us has about 14 to 18 investments. This will be the case, but this corpus is larger. So our check sizes will become larger in the deals that we incrementally participate.
Okay, that's interesting. So, what we have seen in 2023 is that there has been a significant decline, especially when we talk about funding at the growth stage. So, Yash, given the current environment, as well as given where valuations are, do the valuations today give you more comfort at current prices?
Shireen, I think the ecosystem is getting a lot of support from domestic wealth and domestic capital. So we see more and more people who have created businesses, have monetized them participating in this ecosystem. So the ecosystem has got a lot of support from this. We feel that companies which have a good P&L directionally are getting to good cash flows, and there's a balance sheet mismatch. I think those things getting solved for and getting fixed. And more companies now directionally are going to become businesses which are fairly sustainable, viable, and may generate long-term wealth. I think we see a lot of support from the domestic ecosystem, and in the segment of capital that we are in, which is primarily private, selectively public, with a tailwind of growth. We see enough participation, enough tailwind, and enough support from our LPs, and also find the right set of companies which are built with that DNA.
Yeah, Mithun, just to take that forward, we have seen a significant correction. We've also seen companies now much more focused on actual delivering on actual sustainability, bringing down cash burn. And that's a good sign as far as the ecosystem is concerned, as Yash was also pointing out. But what across themes that you are looking at today gives you most comfort, gives you most confidence?
I think this is one of the, to your question about valuation as well, Shirin, the earlier one. I think private markets are are in a better place right now than the public markets seem to be at this point. I also think that there's been a knock on the head for most entrepreneurs over the last 2 years, because money has been hard to come by, and I'm reading that it's been we've had possibly one of the lowest in terms of this year. And that sort of drives a lot of sense, because I feel the best businesses are always going to be built with constraints. And these constraints have sort of created a better environment for us to look at consumer businesses, which will grow with these constraints and thus deliver better return for all of us as well also. So consumer businesses is the larger theme that we're looking at, and that's possibly where I add value as well also. We want to look at that as our mainstay in everything that we do.
I want to get both of you to comment on what you see as far as this private-public market convergence is concerned in terms of valuations. And we're now looking at the possibility of some big-ticket IPOs coming in, perhaps Ola, Oyo, and so on and so forth. Mithun, I'll start by asking you, I was having a conversation with Rajan Anandan just a few days ago, and he said, look, the experience of the way that we've seen new age companies list is that the Indian markets don't really appreciate or like loss-making entities. Given the previous experience that we've seen, what would your expectation really be on the pipeline of IPOs that are headed to Dalal Street?
I have a slightly contrarian view maybe to Rajan on that. I think globally people don't like loss-making businesses, and businesses in the public market are expected to make cash flow. Look at what has happened to consumer businesses in the US that listed as loss-making and didn't deliver the growth, and they've really been beaten down as well. So I think maturity is important when people bring it to the public market, and people should take their time and have patience. When cash flows are a lot more steady, when growth is consistent, that's the right time to bring it to the public market. Till then, I think staying private is the right way to do it. You cannot come to public markets with volatility, because that's not what the average public signed up for. And I think it's extremely important as founders, as investors, to be prudent, because it's a responsibility to maintain this ecosystem for a long period of time. And the way you maintain is to nurture it. So if you make bad IPOs, I don't think we do any favors to ourselves in the long run.
No, we certainly don't, and no favors to the ecosystem either. Yash, I'll get a quick word from you on this as well.
So, Shireen, I think there is a big temperament shift for the cap table, for the founders, as they move from private to publics, because they're attuned to raise capital every 18-24 months. Businesses like what Mithun has built, or there are certain businesses which has been profitable and cash flow creative from very early stages. I think for them that journey is easier because they're not attuned to raise capital every once in a while. I think the way that we look at public and private cycles, I think what we see is these public and private cycles happen to be complementary, as at the stage at this point of time where private valuations are fairly favorable and you get good businesses. The way that we look at Shireen is, I think this public and this private-public integration for us gives us the upside of higher growth businesses, but also manages liquidity for us. Because our primary base of LPs, they do not want to see capital in the next decade. By participating in businesses and a certain percentage of a portfolio into companies which are getting public or are closer to getting over there, I think helps you manage liquidity better and return capital faster. So I think that is the way that we look at this to sharpen our liquidity curve for our LPs.
Right, Mithun, very quickly, final word from you. Second wind as an entrepreneur, investor, or for now, only investment?
For now, investing, but certainly there'll be a second wind.
Certainly, there will be a second wind. Mithun Sacheti and Yash Kela, always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us, and we wish you the very best of luck. Thanks very much for joining us here on Business 360. With that, it is time for us to take a quick break here on CNBC TV18. The news will continue. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a second with more.
CNBC TV18, embarking on a quarter century of excellence.